Hello everyone, and welcome to Facebook Live with Autism Speaks. My name is Dave Kieran. I'm the Director of Adult Services here at Autism Speaks. I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Valerie Paradis. Val is a board member of Autism Speaks. She's also the founder of the Center for Integrated Self-Advocacy, the Autistic Global Initiative, or AGI. She's the director of the Global Leadership Institute at First Place, Arizona. And she's also a woman who's on the autism spectrum and the mother of a young adult son with autism. So thanks so much for joining us today, Val.
Thanks, Dave.
My first question that I wanted to address with you is, why was it important for you to join the board of Autism Speaks?
Yes. Well, joining the board is very important to me for a number of reasons. I think first and foremost, I really value dialogue in our community, and I value honesty and directness. And I know that our community has multiple viewpoints and perspectives and experiences, and I actually treasure the richness of that experience very, very much. And so I first actually became involved with Autism Speaks, not as a board member, but working directly with staff, and particularly in family services. And the word family at Autism Speaks and family services is really what it is. It's a family, an amazing team of people, everyone's so committed, and diversity at Autism Speaks too. There are family members who have loved ones on the spectrum working here. There are people with autism working here at Autism Speaks, and there's just a wide range of abilities and contributions. And I think that just really engaging and feeling a lot of trust and mutual respect with family services is where I got started. And with time, that dialogue grew, and eventually Stephen Shore and I were both invited to be on the board, which I was also feeling at the time was such a strong move, that it wasn't just one of us, and that we represent two genders. And so it's just been a really lovely path, and the dialogue continues, and I want to bring that dialogue and push it out to the community very much, because there's a lot of great change happening at Autism Speaks, and also a lot of unsung sort of work and heroes here who have been working very hard, who I just treasure. And so that's why I loved joining the board and being a part of all of this.
That's great, thank you. And just on behalf of the staff, we feel really fortunate to have you and Stephen Shore as part of the board. We've worked with you for a lot of years, like you said, and always valued your input and your perspective as a person on the spectrum and a parent and a professional. So we're thrilled to have you. So as part of our first topic that we wanted to cover today, it's a discussion about employment. And luckily and fortunately, there's been a lot of success stories out there recently, getting a lot of press attention. We still know that the numbers are not very promising. The vast majority of adults with autism are still unemployed or underemployed. But the success stories, as great as they are, and as much as we support them, and we do work with some of those companies, they're kind of trending towards a very small sliver of all the opportunities that are out there, kind of one industry, a certain type of job. So how do we make sure that opportunities are made available to people across the autism spectrum with all the wide variety of skills and interests that people have?
Yeah, that's a really good question and point to make. I think we are running a bit of a risk in the autism community of creating a stereotype of, every person with autism does IT or is naturally good at IT. I mean, there are many of us who are. However, just like the broader population of people who are not on the spectrum or are not neurodiverse, we have a breadth of abilities and skills and contributions to make. And so it's very important to really be sure that we're building out experiences and opportunities in all sectors, and also for people across the spectrum. So, there's a lot of sort of assumptions made then if everyone with autism, does tech or IT work, what does that mean for those who don't have those skills or don't have that kind of ability to access that kind of education? There's such a breadth of opportunities there for so many of us, whether we're speaking or non-speaking individuals, no matter what level of support we need day to day or the level of accommodations we need. Right. And so I'm just all for building out workforce in every sector, just like the workforce exists for everybody else.
Totally agree. Yeah. And sometimes we see actually the people in the middle are the ones who kind of get lost, because at one end you have people being kind of pigeonholed into this tech sector. At the other end, where people presume incompetence and someone with autism must be very disabled, right, they're ushered into food, filth, flowers,
exactly.
etc.
Yeah. So we still have a long way to go, and really a lot of the work has to do with addressing those stereotypes and nipping them in the bud by modeling other examples, offering other types of programs, and building out all sectors.
Absolutely.
To hire people with autism.
And just to mention to the audience, we do have one initiative ongoing at Autism Speaks, or a couple really, that address this. One is called Advice, and this is a corporate consultancy program. So we're working with some expert consultants with some large businesses, regional and national, in some cases international businesses, to help them start up autism hiring programs. But it's very important to Autism Speaks and our co-funders that this is looking at opportunities from top to bottom in the company, in every area that they operate in, so that we're not pigeonholing. It's not up to us what positions become available. Right. It's to really capture the strengths and interests of people on the spectrum.
That's great.
Yeah. So that we're excited about that. And we also have the spectrumcareers.com. Right. Again, the businesses that post jobs on that site, it's a job search site for people with autism, designed by a young man with autism. And as part of that goal, the businesses that post, we say, give us all your jobs. Yeah. Don't give us only the IT or, right. So we have 200,000 positions in there now. Yeah. So we really want to make sure that those all become available. Yeah, it's helpful to check it out. If you're looking for a job or you know someone on the spectrum who's looking for a job, I've certainly checked it out myself from time to time, just as a board member, and my own son Elijah has used it in the past as well. So it's great. Yeah. And there's lots of other tools too. I mean, one that I like in particular that helps people with autism with this job search, how to write a resume, how to prepare for an interview, is an online video module course called Optimize. Yeah. Just one of many that are out there, but one that we've been speaking with a lot that I think it's worth checking out. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go to one question here, Val. Okay. Before we come back to our discussion. And we had a couple of good questions about being diagnosed as an adult. I think you have experience with that. Yes. So two related questions. One is, why seek a diagnosis? Mm-hmm. Why is that important or helpful to some people? Yeah. And the other is, if you do have a recent diagnosis, how do you find the right therapist? What should people look for? Okay, those are really good questions. Well, first of all, why seek diagnosis? And really, at any age, if you're an adult, that's something that, if you're on the spectrum and you're, tuning in with us, it's something to just inquire within yourself. Will that support you in your life in new ways? As for my own experience, once I was diagnosed, I was able to actually review and return to past relationships where things didn't go so well, where there might have been misunderstandings, or where my own difficulty, reading social cues in closer relationships with people took me down paths that I didn't need to go down. And so I think in that regard, if you really want your life condition or your quality of life to improve, and you think that might help with your relationships, it's definitely worth pursuing. It may also be worth pursuing if you may be qualifying for services that could support you in new ways that you never knew you could have access to. And also, it may connect you to people like me and others like us who, with open arms welcome you to our tribe. We're a strong, loving, caring group of people on the spectrum, and we really support one another. So
And then if you're a family member and you're concerned about someone in your family who's an adult and you feel maybe on the spectrum, having a frank conversation may be helpful, but also just providing literature about being on the spectrum may be helpful. So again, it's really up to the person. If you think it'll help your life condition now, I say go for it. It helped me immensely.
We do have a toolkit. Autism Speaks has over 40 toolkits that address different challenges across kind of the timeline, the lifespan. And one is written for people just like you who may have gotten a recent diagnosis as an adult. It's called "Is It Autism? And If So, What Next?" And it addresses a lot of those topics, Val, that you touched on.
And it's a process post-diagnosis, and it's a very rich one, and it can really open doors and enrich your life. So, yeah.
Thank you. We're going to keep coming back to your questions, so please keep them coming. There are a couple of more topics that I wanted to ask Val about. In particular, one that I know is important to you personally is mentorship.
Yeah.
So you mentioned this incredible community of people with autism supporting one another. And something that you've been doing a lot of over the years is mentoring, in particular, young women, but also young men.
Yes.
Why is that so important, and how can we help kind of build that out and help connect people?
Absolutely. Well, I'm passionate about mentoring. The passion began first with just self-advocacy and really feeling that all of us on the spectrum or with other neurodiversities really need to learn how to be self-advocates and learn really important skills in that arena. But then that led me to the fact that many of us with autism or other neurodiversities mentor one another through that process of acquiring those abilities and really providing each other with, going back to the tribe, like a safe space to learn that and test that out and learn from other people's experiences. And I just think that's a very powerful, yet to be tapped aspect of our culture and our community as people on the spectrum. And I think that with time and more funding and investment, we're going to get there. There are a lot of exciting and emerging things happening formally that I'm working on, but also informally, I do mentor a group of young adults with autism and actually work with them on developing work skills, but also self-advocacy skills. And they often work for me in my company, and then they kind of move on and start their own things. But it's just really important across the board for all aspects of life. Yeah,
I agree. And it's something we've talked about with Autism Speaks, the visibility we have and the networks. Maybe we could become a connecting point.
Yes.
That helps people find one another.
Yes.
And with technology today, it's much easier to do. So
absolutely. I mean, really important to have a mentor in your life if you don't have one, and a peer mentor, someone on the spectrum or with another, similar neurodiverse diagnosis could be helpful. Also, if you're in the LGBTQ community and you're on the spectrum, having a mentor specifically in that arena can be really beneficial because our experience of those issues and differences is very profound. So,
switching to a different topic is the quality of services. So one thing that we know and we're trying to address is there certainly isn't the quantity that we need of service providers who can serve adults with autism. As the numbers continue to climb, we don't have the number of services, especially in rural areas, but really everywhere.
Yeah.
But in addition to that problem is the lack of quality.
Yes.
Or poor quality, lack of training,
yes.
lack of agreed upon standards.
Yes.
So what do you think that problem means for our community? What do we need to be doing? And tell us about some of the things you've been working on to try and create some standards and training.
Absolutely. Well, actually my first relationship with Autism Speaks was through really generous grants that Autism Speaks provided to AGI, the Autistic Global Initiative. And, as a team of adults and professionals working in the fields of disability services and advocacy, along with co-collaborators who were also professionals in the autism services arena and not on the spectrum. We developed a very comprehensive training to train direct support providers, direct support workers who support individuals with autism and other neurodiversities in daily living. And what we've been doing since building that course and offering it online is really pushing now for a certification. And with certification also comes standards. And so it's sort of a dual process of ensuring that policy is being shaped in ways to really mandate standards of care. And we're not there yet, but the curriculum exists and the content exists and people have been trained by it, over 1,000 people now, and really continuing on that path of changing policy and also providing direct support workers with sort of the dignity of training and valuing their work is really critical.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem, I think, is that these are tough jobs, and they're really underpaid and undervalued.
Yes.
So we see a super high turnover rate in this field, and a kind of a lack of respect and a lack of commitment to training them and investing in them.
And, it would be interesting to really understand the sort of a cost-benefit analysis of increasing pay for direct support workers, training them properly, and whether an agency or organization saves money doing that, because just the investment that goes into the high turnover rate and the loss in that in of itself is significant. So.
Yeah, and I'd add, to any service providers out there, I think there's a market here to set yourself apart as an autism expert in supporting adults with autism. There aren't enough out there. So there's a place where you can really set yourself apart, and we need more of that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to go to a couple of questions from the Facebook group.
Great.
Here's an interesting one, and that we've heard from people.
Okay.
My son is 15. This comes from Joy. He has autism, and someday he will apply for a job. Do we let the employer know up front about his autism? This is a big question about disclosure. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think first it's important to educate your son about disclosure and also the law around disclosure. So, for example, one does not, by law, have to disclose any disability or difference, at a job interview or in an application. You really have to understand the company you're applying to. It may be that they already know, or they're welcoming applications from, neurodiverse applicants. And so it's important just to first have a dialogue with your child or your son or daughter ahead of time and let them be part of the process. So definitely don't disclose on their behalf without speaking for them with them first. And then if you do, develop a plan for disclosure. Have your son or daughter develop a plan for how they wish to disclose. It doesn't have to be verbally. It can be in any number of ways. And then if the individual doesn't wish to disclose, then really understand then what that might mean as not necessarily a consequence, but as a result. So it's just really important to educate, though, what disclosure is in the first place before you start doing anything else in that direction.
Yeah, it's a great answer. We have some information about this, and it's a very personal decision. So there's some tips to kind of weighing the pros and cons in our employment toolkit. So a place where I've kind of landed on this is that it's really important for anyone, but for job seekers with autism, not so much to say the word autism, but to know what support needs you may have. So to be really familiar with what accommodations you may need to ask for an employer. And that doesn't mean having to say autism if you don't want to disclose. It just means asking for what you need.
That's right.
That's what we're really talking about.
Sometimes we call that a partial disclosure. So, if you get migraines because of lighting in your office, you can say, I get migraines, right? that's a partial disclosure of maybe some other underlying health diagnosis. So it's not either or, in other words,
That's
which
right.
I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah.
Here's another one related to employment and something that we've heard a lot of too. My son, this is from Robin. My son will be 22 in a few weeks. He stays stuck in his room with his video games and gaming computer, etc. He built his own gaming computer from scratch, but he has no idea what he wants to do for employment. So just kind of maybe not just about Robin's son, but we hear a lot about this where people with autism have real strong skills and interests, but don't necessarily know where's the pathway to employment. What can we tell these people?
Yeah, well, I think one step is to consider a mentor. That can always be very helpful and transitional for someone. And if someone's hanging out in their bedroom all day long, you might want to have a heart-to-heart conversation just about that in and of itself. Make sure that your son or daughter, or the one on the spectrum that you love, understands what depression is, what anxiety is, what maybe even PTSD is, post-traumatic stress disorder, based on perhaps trauma experiences from the past in school or elsewhere, because quite often you really have to tease all these things out. Some of us also really need our solitude and our deep and focused interest to manage day-to-day life. And so really trying to kind of investigate more deeply in a safe space with that individual, or with the support of a mentor who is also on the spectrum, can be very, very useful. And it's, again, a process. So I think just really getting with that person on their level and really trusting their experience of what their life is like and what they really aspire toward may need help also sort of mapping what they aspire for.
Yeah. I think that's really important. And the traditional pathways to employment aren't always evident to our community, but we can help kind of make these new pathways.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention one other group that I think is doing some interesting stuff here, as we as a community have been recognizing more and more that these special interests, some people may call them obsessions or different terms, they used to be looked at as part of a detriment to social skills, right? If they can only talk about trains, they're not making friends. But now we're looking at it more in terms of strengths and how to harness that kind of interest, and how can we turn it into a path for employment. Yeah. Because they often, people with autism with a special interest like that, often develop a real expertise beyond what most neurotypical people can do.
Absolutely, and quite often it'll become something very specific.
Yes.
And this kind of, this is really the message that Temple Grandin's had for years for our community. I mean, really decades. And it kind of circles back to our opening theme of stereotypes too, like if you follow someone's interests and help them build new horizons, whether it's like even if it's a child, like transitioning from the house, to a different environment based on their special interest or their deep interest, as I like to call it, that can actually open doors to other new directions that may become paths for employment, but also paths for how one spends one's time. And I also think that greater acceptance of autistic people in the community also, that sort of, it's a two-way street where we can express those focused interests in ways that are accepted by, greater society at the same time. So it's sort of like, it's an exciting time, I think.
It is.
To have a passion and be autistic.
I agree. Yeah. And the group that I wanted to mention is the website is called sidekicks.com. It was developed by Ron Suskind and his team, who you may be familiar with him from the documentary that was Oscar nominated. But what they're looking at are what they call affinities. So these categories of special interest that we see quite commonly in people with autism. And can we help those people connect with one another, getting back to the mentorship? and how can we help kind of when we identify the different affinity groups, can we help them plug into maybe those more traditional pathways to employment?
Yes.
So we help Sidekicks put out a survey that I think they'll be reporting back on later this fall.
Nice.
So we look forward to that.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
So something that you mentioned a few minutes ago was PTSD and trauma potentially from school years or the past.
Yeah.
I know this is important to you and others of your colleagues at AGI.
Yeah.
Tell us more about this and why this is really important to learn more about and how we can better support people with autism who have experienced trauma.
Absolutely. Well, this is a very important topic to myself and to many of us at AGI, the Autistic Global Initiative. And really, the person who I want to shout out to at AGI is Sandra Williams, who really made us as a team of people on the spectrum at AGI focus on this as a very essential problem that is really kind of present throughout our community. From past experiences that we may have as children in school, being bullied, or even just left out or socially misunderstood, or not included, or just sort of misunderstood, to more profound issues of the high number of people who take advantage of our nature, both in abusive ways or in exploitive ways, and those often result in trauma experiences that we, without the right tools, don't know how to process or understand or work with. And quite often, historically, those very behaviors that we experience from past traumas might just be deemed, oh, that's autistic behavior.
Yeah, right.
And it's very important to separate that out. And really, one place to start is look at the whole trauma-informed care movement and just make sure all of your staff is trained in trauma and understanding trauma, because our community, many people with autism, that's getting in their way of moving forward in so many ways. So I'm very passionate about that.
And I know you are, and that you guys have done some great work, and you've produced some films, haven't you?
We've produced a couple of films, and one of them has yet to be really debuted. So we'll be submitting that to film festivals and things very soon. So,
cool.
Yeah.
So we have a few more questions from the Facebook Live audience. We'll be here for a few more minutes, so if you want to submit your questions now, we'd like to take them.
Bring them on.
Here's from someone named Guy. Okay. Guy says, I became a self-advocate, and I do have a question. What skills can we use to help another person with autism to overcome challenges? So he's a new mentor, it sounds like.
Yeah. Thanks, Guy. I'm glad you're thinking along those lines. There are a lot of ways that you can start with someone in mentoring them, depending on their age and their own experience and self-awareness. Sometimes people need support just understanding what their sensory and social communication differences are, becoming more self-aware of those, and how to make simple requests for accommodations and really feel strength in doing so, and not shrinking their lives and their experiences, and not going to new events or meeting new people or trying new things because of those very differences. So that gets at the core of some of our core characteristics of who we are as people on the spectrum. And then there are all kinds of other themes and topics. I really break it out, in my work at the Center for Integrated Self-Advocacy into 5 arenas. So environmental advocacy, which includes sensory, social communication advocacy, civil rights and entitlements. I hope I don't forget them all, but I'm not going to list them all now. But
go to the website.
Yeah, go to the website, autismselfadvocacy.com. But yeah, so there's just a lot of places to start. But one thing you might do is, if you're going to mentor someone, is really find out where they need to start first, and not overwhelm them, but give them small small things to problem solve and think through and feel success in doing, and then build upon that.
Related to self-advocacy, what we see a lot in the adult community is when aging parents become, they have their own difficulties with aging that they need to handle, and a lot of times advocacy is then passed on to a sibling.
Right.
So we have a question here from an adult sibling of a 33-year-old. Her name is Violia. I'm not taken seriously because I'm not his parent. So she's having a hard time being that advocate.
Yeah.
Any just general advice for siblings, or specifically about how to be taken seriously as your sibling's advocate?
Yeah, that is such a good question. One thing I would want to know, I guess, is what is your sibling's expression of autism? In other words, how much support does he or she require in terms of your advocacy? Is there a place where you can meet your sibling partway and actually begin to assist them in developing more self-advocacy ability while you continue the path of advocating with and on his or her behalf? So I think actually creating a shared process would be important. And then also, if you're feeling like you're not being taken seriously, you may want to connect to organizations like Autism Speaks, use some of the toolkits to build up those advocacy strategies. Because quite often, if you build up those strategies, people do listen, and maybe you may need more support just developing yourself in that way.
Yeah, and depending on the level of need of your brother, there are legal steps that can be taken to be a true, legally representative or a guardian, etc. of your brother, and they will be forced to take you seriously. But I think, in general, Val's point of kind of that teamwork approach, collective advocacy is really the most effective. Yeah,
I think anything having to do with advocacy, there's the disability movement's key phrase, which is nothing about us without us.
Right.
And I think it's really important that when you want to advocate for someone on the spectrum or who's neurodiverse, that you make them a part of that with you, and that you also never miss an opportunity for us to learn new skills in advocacy, because that's really the ultimate answer. Is as much as we can do that ourselves, the more likely, the voice will be authentic, and our real self-determination comes through.
Absolutely. So we'll take maybe 2 more questions, Val. Is that sound good to you?
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question about technology, which is an exciting area that we've seen a lot of kind of movement in. So this is something that we weren't prepared to talk about. So let's see if we have an answer. So Heidi asks, are there apps that help build independent living skills at home or at work?
Oh my goodness. Well, yes.
So many apps being developed. Right?
Yeah. I mean, off the top of my head, I am not able to start listing them. Yeah. But I don't know. Does Autism Speaks that? Yeah.
So we do have a page where you can find, I think it's called Apps for Autism.
Yeah.
What I will caution you is, and part of our problem right now is that there are apps being developed literally every day.
Yeah.
And many of them are targeting the disabled community and people with autism. There hasn't been a whole lot of research yet into the effectiveness of some of the impact of these apps. But you can take a look at our site. I'll tell you, there's a really great expert down in Virginia, Commonwealth University. His name is Tony Gentry. He's a professor there of a laboratory that's looking at exactly this kind of thing, assistive technologies and apps.
Yeah.
So there are experts that you can talk to about which ones work well.
Yeah, and there's so many apps that aren't designed specifically for people with disabilities or other differences that are equally useful. And I think just like anybody else, we all have our own set of go-to apps. So supporting someone in identifying those can be extremely empowering. I know it is for me. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about the apps that we all have, Siri and Alexa, and I know many of my colleagues here at Autism Speaks use those really well, or their children with autism who have maybe limited communication skills or other challenges are able to do a lot more independently thanks to the access we all now have in our pocket.
Oh, yeah. I mean, things have changed a lot. And I can't wait for the day when every non-speaking person with autism, as well as those who do speak, have total access to technology and the training they need to be able to functionally communicate in any and every setting. I'm just, that's the horizon that we have ahead of us, and a lot's happened very fast in technology. And it's exciting for me to see where this may bring our population forward and make so many new doors open.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah.
And we'll make this our last question. We really appreciate Val spending time with us today.
I love being here.
So here's a question from Daniel. It's so difficult to get my 22-year-old daughter to try to work or take online classes. Are there any suggestions on how to best motivate her?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to come right back to that mentor piece again. And also, this is based on sort of personal experience as well with my son, and also just with meeting so many people, parents and young adults on the spectrum. That generation of millennials on the spectrum, that's a very pioneering generation, and there are too many who are facing this issue of not knowing or not having the tools or the ability to explore what's next for them in their lives. And really, just because these are my passions and it's the way I've watched so many people change and grow, is the mentoring, combined with really looking at, are there existing things that need to be looked at, past trauma, depression, anxiety, other issues that really may need some attention. And really, when someone's a young adult, they really need to be around other adults with autism to begin to feel self-esteem, value, and really pride. And so I think really tapping into identifying a mentor on the spectrum is really, really critical for that age group who are experiencing their lives in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Something that John Elder Robeson, another self-advocate, talks about a lot is we need more success stories and role models of autistic people who are professionals or have been successful. Yeah. And I think the good news is we're going to see a lot more of those people over the next couple of years because of the success stories that we know are coming.
Yeah.
And that will be helpful, just because when you can see someone who is like you, who is successful, it's very inspiring, and maybe can change some of the outlook for some of these young adults.
I agree. Yeah. And I think investing in formal mentoring programs, like really funding it, is really critical. Because people with autism are the answer to many of these big questions, and we need to play a much bigger role in answering the questions. And with advances in the past 20 years, there are more and more of us who are able to do that, and that number is only going to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we want to thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with us at Autism Speaks, and we all want to thank Dr. Valerie Paradis for sharing your time, your expertise, your experience, and your perspective with us. So thanks so much, Val.
Thanks, Dave.
It was a pleasure.
This has been great.
Yeah, it's always good to see you. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Take care.